Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's HRM Ask Me Anything series. Our HRM AMA series is brought to you by the Living Security community. And I see we've got Jenny Kenny on our AMA today. Good morning, Jenny, and welcome. She leads our Living Security community. And yeah, we encourage you all to sign up for it or check it out at community.livingsecurity.com. So yeah, welcome, Jenny. I'd also like to welcome Shawnee Delaney, who is going to be in the hot seat today of our AMA. So Shawnee's got a wealth of experience in security and insider threat, as well as positive security culture. And so yeah, with that, Shawnee, welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah. So we're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We're letting people continue to join. But in the meantime, as a fun game, we always kind of ask folks to put into the chat where they're joining from. Um, so, um, so yeah, I know we've got people all over the country. I think, Shawnee, you're in the DC area. Is that
I
right?
am. Yep, it's actually a beautiful day, finally.
Great. Well, great to hear. Yeah, and I see, yeah, we've got some other folks nearby in both North Carolina, South Carolina. Ooh,
Nice.
Austin, Denver, Atlanta. So yeah, we're covering most of the United States.
I like it.
Yeah, great. Um, and then yeah, also, just a couple logistical things for today's AMA. We also ask you to submit your questions into the Q&A tool of the webinar. So feel free to submit questions. What we're going to do today, we're actually going to start with a brief presentation that Shawnee's going to do, and that'll give folks a chance to put some questions in there. And then from there, we're going to open it up. And Shawnee, you are going to be on the hot seat.
Oh, I
So
love being on the hot seat.
great. Yeah, so with that, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, like I said, thanks for having me and for everyone joining. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to hear me chat. So let's get into it. I want to know, and if we were live, I would ask everybody, how many of you have ever quit a job? And I'd ask you to show your hands. And then my follow-up question would be, and I want you to think about this, did you quit because it wasn't a good fit for you? Was it a toxic workplace? Was it a bad leader, or was it the culture? And normally when I do that, most hands go up, including mine, more than once. So most of you, if not all of you, have been there before to some degree, and you know how important company culture is because you've likely experienced a bad one or a toxic one. So, organizational culture, it's the set of values and beliefs and attitudes and systems and rules that outline and influence employee behavior within that organization. And the culture reflects how employees and customers and vendors and stakeholders experience your organization and its brand. So, why is this important? Because companies with healthy cultures are 1.5 times more likely to experience revenue growth of 15% or more over 3 years. So, real quickly, excuse me, I want to get into employee lifecycle management. People often really get frustrated about where to start when they're building a human risk management program. And I like to say, this is my free or cheap offering to you. This shouldn't be a heavy lift. It's really refining processes a lot of the time. So that is employee lifecycle management. So if you look at the top of this slide at Attract, advertise your job honestly, please. If your employees can't have their phone at work, for example, say that in the advertisement. Because if someone's applying for a job and they don't truly know what they're getting into, you're going to start to breed disgruntlement, and that eventually will snowball more and more. The next is recruit. So when you're recruiting, do pre-employment screening, right? And good screening. Interviews should clearly lay out what your cultural values are, what your ethics, your norms, etc. You also have to tell the candidate what's expected of them. I've had many job interviews over the course of my life where none of that was covered. I had to ask. Also, I would have at least one person, if not everybody to some degree, asking questions to assess if that candidate is a good cultural fit for your organization. They could look great on paper, their resume, they could interview brilliantly. It doesn't mean they're a good cultural fit. And again, you're setting yourself up for potential problems if they're not. And then you might want to consider personality assessments, even if it's just for higher risk positions. Those can give you a really great insight into that person. The next is onboarding. With onboarding here, people, it's usually death by PowerPoint, but you want that job orientation, you want the training modules. This is your chance to build a security culture. This is a critical phase in this whole life cycle. Clear onboarding processes improve retention rates by 23%. This is also where you influence this employee the most. You really have the opportunity to shape their cultural buy-in and promote what's important to you. And right now I'm like foot stomping, security, security, right? You want to give security awareness training. You want to talk about insider threat or risk, policies, procedures, good cyber hygiene, work from home best practices, how to report concerns and why it's safe to report and why all of these are important. And again, company culture needs to be explained probably multiple times in multiple ways here. Next, we move on to development. With development, this is performance management. This is training and awareness. Everyone knows I love training and awareness. Pulse surveys, get the feedback, listen to the feedback, share it with your employees, monitor for critical pathway or behavioral indicators when someone is maybe starting to get disgruntled, things like that. Then we move into retain. Retain is like talent management, right? We want career development. If you show employees that you're investing in them and their well-being, it might not even have to do with their job that they're doing now. Those people are more likely to stay loyal to that organization. Think about return to work or stay to work programs and services. Conduct continual performance reviews. And I would tie performance to cultural fit, right? To cultural values. That's helping people embody your cultural values. Reward people. When you reward people, you retain those good employees and solicit feedback from employees. Again, listen and take action. Action speaks louder than words. And another point, and I might even say this again because this is really, really important, but update those values, update your cultural norms and policies and procedures as needed. These things can change and they can shift over time and with what's going on in the world, really, and the threats that are out there. And then finally, offboarding. With offboarding, this is really a critical touch point in this life cycle. So when you're offboarding someone, and it can be voluntary or involuntary, you have to do it really thoughtfully for that case. If you can ask me a question, should we do this? I'm going to say it depends, because it depends on that person. It depends on your system. It depends on your culture. But again, thoughtful is the key here, right? And I'm going through these really fast so we have time to get through questions. So pardon the cheetah speed. So again, I really, really want to hit why culture is so important. And you can look at some of these metrics, but here are just some fun facts for your Tuesday. What is it, Tuesday, Wednesday? I don't know what it is. Wednesday, right?
Tuesday.
77% of workers consider a company's culture before they even apply to an organization. That's a pretty big number. A good culture is one of the main reasons that 65% of employees actually stay in their job. 38% of employees report wanting to change their job due to poor company culture. Been there, totally. And companies with a positive culture have up to 72% higher employee engagement. So, I mean, the numbers don't really lie, right? I want to focus on stress for a little bit here. According to LinkedIn, stress is becoming a real corporate killer. 77% of US employees have experienced burnout in their jobs. And according to this report on LinkedIn, excessive work, lack of resources to accomplish their work, limited freedom in decision making, those are all some of the causes of burnout. And the number of workers who are stressed is really increasing each year. Gallup did another poll, and what they found out is it's called the State of the Global Workplace Survey. And they saw that although employees are more engaged, they're also more stressed. And the report found that managers play a significant role in the stress employees experience. Again, been there. Micro stress, if anyone's never heard of this. So micro stress is really critical. So micro stress is the small moments of everyday stress from the interactions you have with your colleagues. For example, the more points of interaction that the employee has or the more tools that they use, the more they're exposed to micro stress. So this type of stress might seem insignificant, but if it's really left unchecked, it can become dangerous, according to the Harvard Business Review. There's also a book, if anyone has time, read. It's called The Burnout Challenge. In this book, researchers identified the 6 areas where there's basically a mismatch between the employee and their job position. And those are the primary causes of chronic stress in the workplace. And according to these researchers, these 6 mismatches, if you will, are lack of control, work overload, inequity at work, not enough benefits, breakdown of community, and value conflicts. Now, getting into gender, when it comes to gender, women are more prone to burnout compared to men. It's 37%. So furthermore, if you think about it, working moms are more likely to suffer burnout than working dads. And there's no single reason we can pin on why that's more likely to occur in women, but experts say that the factors that contribute to burnout might vary, right? It depends always. However, different research shows that women face unique challenges such as discrimination, gender-based expectations, and the likelihood of juggling multiple roles, both at work and at home. And that came from CNBC. There's a company called Qualtrics, and they did a study, and they found that the top driver of stress is because of the processes and systems in their workplace are ineffective. I'm sure everyone here has worked with broken. I said worked and broken together as woken. Those really cause frustration, right? So they don't just cause stress, they actually affect productivity. Stress, along with other mental health issues, are really the primary reasons for high absenteeism rates also. So SHRM did another report, and they found that stress or mental related leaves are up to 33% just in 2023. And out of those leaves, 69% of those leaves and absences were taken by women. So you can see, again, it's not quite balanced. And some of the negative impacts that the workers feel include emotional exhaustion, feeling unmotivated, low productivity, and just a general desire to quit. We all heard about the Great Resignation, right? And furthermore, up to 40% of workers say that they're not getting the breaks or the time off that they need. And that comes from the American Psychological Association. So a lot of numbers, but I think this really paints a really strong picture. So it's important first to take a look at a comprehensive approach to defining risk, right? A lot of people don't even know how to define it. So risk, it's not just looking at a simple metric or a standalone, like whether someone clicked on a phishing email or if someone reused a password, things like that. So really, risk needs to be defined by 3 things. You've got the threat. What is that threatening activity? For example, in this case, you're looking at the slide, it's the bulk data movement. Okay. Second is the vulnerability. What is the vulnerability? In this case here, it's confidential information. We definitely don't want to lose that. And then third is impact. Does that user have a special impact? Such as in this case, the user has privileged access. That's a little scary, right? So if you put all of these things together, it gives you just a much better general picture of risk. Now, I want to give you a case study real quick about how culture really can affect things. If anyone has not heard this case, that you are looking at a man named Joshua Schulte. And Joshua was a former CIA software engineer who was convicted of leaking classified information to WikiLeaks in 2017. Now, Joshua worked in a very small, specialized office for the CIA. And the office developed, the culture was really like a rowdy frat house, is the best way I can describe it. They brought Nerf guns to work. They, used bad words, and it was just kind of out of control. Now, everyone thought it was fun, right? Except for one guy, Joshua. Joshua, his colleagues said, had a quote unquote pronounced tendency to overreact. So you can see the divide here. So he took everything too far. His colleagues said he just really took everything big. And so they gave him the office nickname Nuclear Option. Schulte's relationship with his coworkers became so increasingly poisonous, and eventually he left. So everyone was relieved, and he took a job in New York. No harm, no foul. But about 4 months later, WikiLeaks published a huge trove of data from his old office. Now, at the time, New York Times said it was the largest leak of CIA documents in history. WikiLeaks released thousands of pages describing really sophisticated software tools and classified techniques used by the agency to break into smartphones and computers and even internet-connected televisions. So I always talk about motivations and vulnerabilities. If you've ever heard me talk, I will always talk about that. So it's really interesting to me when you're looking at this case, the prosecution's theory for Joshua's case was that he was motivated by spite. He just wanted to get back at his former colleagues. So again, culture matters. If someone had done a good culture fit assessment in the interview, they would have recognized this guy was a terrible fit for that office. Now, there are various ways we can assess security culture. You can do it quantitatively and qualitatively, and I want to give you some examples. So for quantitative, the first is having a human risk management program. You can track the number of security incidents here. You can track near misses, reported vulnerabilities over time. You can measure the participation rates in security training programs and the completion rates of mandatory cybersecurity courses. You can do phishing simulations. Now, everyone's heard about phishing simulations. Doing this really tests and measures employee susceptibility to phishing attacks, but you can analyze click rates and reported rates of simulated phishing emails. I have some other thoughts on phishing simulations if you have questions. And then compliance audits. With compliance audits, here you perform regular audits to ensure compliance with security policies and regulations. You quantify the adherence to security protocols and identify areas for improvement. Then moving into qualitative assessment, you can look at surveys and interviews. I'm a big fan of employee surveys, especially when you actually, again, listen to them. So conducting employee surveys to gauge awareness, attitudes, and perceptions regarding cybersecurity practices. Do they have good cyber hygiene? Perform one-on-one interviews or focus groups to gain deeper insights into the security culture and identify specific concerns or misunderstandings. With behavioral observations, here you observe day-to-day behaviors and practices within that organization to identify any deviations from established security protocols. Monitor informal, I'm losing my voice, I talk way too much. You can monitor informal communication channels and social interactions to understand the implicit security culture. And there's some really cool tools that do this nowadays. And then feedback mechanisms. Here you encourage open feedback from employees about security policies and practices. A lot of times organizations will say, like, I don't want, like, they shouldn't have any feedback, too many cooks in the kitchen, but it's really important to make people feel like they're involved, like they have a say, like they have a choice. And then implement anonymous reporting channels for employees to report security concerns without fear of reprisal. Every company has a no retaliation policy. I guarantee it, but that is not ground truth. And again, I've lived it multiple times. It has to be ground truth. That has to be a real thing. All right. I've jibber jabbered enough. Now I would love to pass it back to David if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, so we've actually gotten several in here. So I'm just going to start working through the different questions that we've gotten. And so I'll start with a relatively straightforward one, but those are always the most dangerous questions I find. So how does a positive security culture impact insider threats? Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, a lot of ways. I think I said earlier, but actions speak louder than words, right? So when you have a positive security culture and your employees can see leadership doing the same thing that they're telling everyone else to do, that really is very impactful. And it can actually be opposite too. If they're seeing that leadership is not doing what they're supposed to be doing like everyone else, that can be very negative and ruin morale. But a positive security culture, what I like is it puts everyone on the same level. You're getting everyone to speak the same language. Everyone's understanding how they potentially could be a risk for your organization. The actions that they do could maybe make them at risk or their family at risk, right? So I think it's that general awareness that will really help mitigate that threat. But the only way you can do that is if you talk about it. It can't be this scary, spooky thing. It has to be, we are here to help you. We're here to help your families. We want to teach you and train you to keep you safe, not just in our offices, but at home as well.
Yeah, that's a really common thread that I've seen as well, is this sort of tension between, not wanting to scare your employees and wanting to
Yeah.
be transparent. And so I completely agree that, transparency is absolutely critical. Okay, so next question. So how can you use an HRM platform to identify insider threats specifically?
That's a good one. So I'll start with benchmarking, right? Basically, when you are able to benchmark employee behaviors, you're creating a baseline and you're able to determine when that deviation is found. So you see everyone's pattern of behavior. And this can not just be HRM, this can actually be in person too. You have everyone's general baseline and pattern of behavior. And when that pattern of behavior changes, that's when you get an alert. Right. So from that alert, you can do a basic digital forensic investigation, try to figure out what it is. Maybe you interview the manager and ask, we see this deviation. Was this work related? Is this business? Is there business justification? If that manager says, I don't know what you're talking about, then you need to do a deeper dive. It enables you to do the investigation. You'll have more data to pull also when you're doing that investigation. You need to do interviews, et cetera. And then with remediation, maybe you figure out, do we need to do retraining? Do we need to call HR? Is this a termination? Or do we need to offer EAP support? That platform should be able to give you some answers that you would not get if you were relying on internal referrals or walk-ins, as I like to call them. You're really barely scratching the surface with that. So you have to look at it as like a force multiplier, essentially.
Yeah, that's a really great point about, yeah, having the baseline data to be able to identify when there's a deviation.
Yeah.
Uh, awesome. Okay, we've got more coming in. So what are some tips, that you have specifically around shifting to a positive security culture? What are some of the different types of things that you think are important?
Yeah, there's a lot. um, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I would really take a look hard at your current cultural values. These should be living and breathing. You have to be able to be willing to shift them or change them as necessary. Maybe you have them right now. That's great and everyone likes them, but do any of them touch on security culture? Is it breeding that at all? So it's possible that you need to reassess and change or update. I have seen organizations, and I really like when they do this, is they actually offer employees to give feedback. Hey, we're reassessing our cultural values. Please give us suggestions for what you think is important. And then there's one really successful one where, employees flooded them with ideas, some really, really great ideas. And leadership took some of those ideas, obviously put in their own, and then did a whole rollout campaign where they were like, all right, these are our new security, values. This is our security culture now. And they put it on like Zoom backgrounds, whatever, do the right thing or things like that. And it really kind of hit it home and it was visible to employees every day. So that was really, really successful. Another thing you could do is conduct a human risk assessment. So in this assessment, you see what the ground truth is, right? You're assessing your policies, your procedures, your playbooks. Are things flowing? Remember the microstress, or are people starting to get frustrated because things are not working? You're getting that ground truth on, yeah, you might have these policies or you might have these cultural values, but do people live them? Do they actually do them? Maybe you have a data classification policy. Super, you all should if you don't. But do people know how to classify their data? Do they know what confidential is? Are they actually doing it? Or do you have a tool to make them do it? Things like that. Also, asking your people if they can recite your cultural values, asking leadership if they can recite their cultural values. I did one assessment actually recently with a fabulous company. They're very, buttoned up. But when I interviewed a senior leader in the organization, this person hemmed and hawed and was like, we support the customer. And I was like, no, wrong answer. Like if that person couldn't even recite them, there was a wider problem. You could start a security champion program, bringing in people, and it doesn't have to be leaders. It could be anybody to embrace what you're trying to get out there and to be a champion, making them, like I always call it, the cool kids club, right? Having meetings and making everyone feel like they're a part of something bigger. Training and awareness, I'll hit it again. Keep it going. Have training and awareness. Make it interesting. Don't make it boring. Bring in speakers. Do little videos. Tie it to things that are going on in the world, like I don't know, awards season or things like that. So you could tie in movies or TV shows, and you're getting engagement with people when you're using pop culture and things that are happening in the world. just don't do it once a year. Don't do it every January in a PowerPoint. Like no one's going to absorb or engage with what you're teaching. And then lastly, I would say running contests again, because you're trying to get employee engagement. So I had mentioned the phishing simulations, and this one I really like, where you actually offer contests for employees to create their own phishing campaign, right? Whoever can come up with the best phishing email wins a prize of some degree. This makes people get outside of the box and they have to think like a threat actor. And they realize with tools out there like AI, just how easy it is to actually do this.
That was a wealth of information, Shawnee. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, in my mind, there were so many things that I've seen, many of our customers doing that you mentioned. And I would just, if people want to learn more about what other folks are doing, we did just host our human risk management conference, and we had, over 20 speakers. And many of those people are sharing these exact types of experiences where they, implemented a champion program, or they were, Fisk, for instance, was very, very clear with policies at the front end, when employees onboarded to make sure that they were aware about these types of things. So there's some really great examples in there for folks that want to learn more. Your answer also prompted a bunch of additional questions. So
Good.
I'm
That's why
gonna
we're
ask
here.
one, and this is I'm really glad someone asked this question, because this is a tough one that I think we all, deal with a little bit, which is, what's the best option for employees who don't care to join in the culture? They
Mm,
don't buy in, and that leads to, poisoning other employees, attitudes. If that person's very integral to the organization, replacing them isn't really an option.
yeah.
So in that instance, what are some things you can do? I mean, I know there's only so much, but I'm sure you've come across this.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah.
So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? When I mentioned tying performance to cultural values, that's one example that would be really helpful in that situation. Sometimes you need to have an intervention. I've worked with senior leaders and organizations who just, it was like, la, 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 they did not want to hear it. And there really is not much you can do. But sometimes having an intervention from above, if somehow you can swing that, can be really helpful. Or just like sitting down one-on-one and having a long meeting where you're briefing, this is what we're doing. This is why people, if you look at human nature, people need to think, what's in it for me? And they need to understand the why. I'm not ever going to tell you, don't click on a link. I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't click on a link, for example. So if you're explaining to this Grinch why we need your buy-in, why we need your support, and how we can help you, what's in it for me, you might be able to persuade them. They're not going to jump on and be like waving flags and in your corner, right? But you might be able to get less pushback, at least with that person or people.
That's really helpful. Yeah, thank you. And it's true. Yeah, you can't, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. It's
I've tried.
yeah. Okay, so we have a couple questions on micro stresses. They both kind of, they're somewhat related, but this one's really interesting too. It has to do, with what are some methods to manage micro stresses amongst employees while still enforcing security best practices. And really kind of what they're getting at is, won't additional trainings add to the micro stresses? I know this is something we all think a lot about, not overburdening employees.
Yeah, I'm making notes so I don't forget my answer because I'm old. A couple things. First is empathy. You have to lead with empathy. I don't care who you are. Everyone should have empathy for what other people are going through, because people might be stressed about stuff outside of the workplace, and the workplace is just compounding on that and making that worse. I will add, and I'm sorry to say this, but when people are in that boat, you do need to watch them a little bit more. People are not always going to be a malicious insider and cause you damage. That could be unintentional. When people are really stressed, again, from home or work or both, that's when people start to make mistakes. When their attention is spread too thin, when their priorities are shifting, when they're frustrated or stressed, you just really need to be very watchful of them. So empathy is important. Back to the human risk assessment, if you conducted something like that, you would be able to get like a full big report on where those those breaks are, where the problems are, where the roadblocks are. Because remember, those micro stresses are coming from broken systems and processes. So if you're able to step back, have someone else do a solid look, because of course you're all going to be biased about your own organization to some degree or another, or team, et cetera, and get just an unvarnished view of the facts, then you can kind of address those issues head on. Also, getting employee feedback, having those sessions. It could be a group session, it could be one-on-one. People are more willing to chat when it's one-on-one, and they definitely know there's no retaliation or it's not going to get back to their boss somehow. I remember taking surveys in a big company, and they're like, well, the manager will only see if they manage more than 5 people, what your responses are, but they won't see names. It's like, come on, come on. And then that manager would come to me and say, hey, someone said this. Do you know who it was? It's like, that is not breeding any sort of trust in that organization. So you have to really focus on trust, where people feel safe that they can come to you and discuss those things when they have those stressors.
Yeah, great answer. And actually, you actually ended right at where our next question begins.
Oh,
So I'm gonna,
I'm
and by
also a
the way,
mind reader, if anyone doesn't know. Yeah.
and by the way, if anyone wants to submit any more, we've got a few more minutes, so feel free to submit. I'm kind of going to do a last call for questions. We're almost through the queue right now. So this next one, it has to do with feedback as well. So what are some of the most effective ways you've seen in soliciting feedback and creating trust so that employees feel comfortable
Yeah.
in submitting and communicating and doing these types of things?
Yeah. Well, remember, first of all, their perception is their reality. You have to remember that. So if they perceive that it is not a safe place, you're kind of paddling upstream first. I would say a combination of surveys, truly anonymous surveys, where you're asking the right questions or asking open-ended questions for them to fill out. I don't want a yes, no. Again, if anyone knows my former background, I used to, work in intelligence. I used to spy for the US government. So when I was trying to get information and I was eliciting information from people, and you're not eliciting, well, maybe you should a little bit, but when I was eliciting, I wasn't going to say, answer something with yes, no. I want more so I know where to move, right? Verbally. And it's the same concept. If you're getting more feedback, you're going to know which direction you should move to pivot. So I might do a combination. If it was like blue sky, I would do a combination of some really great thought out surveys coupled with maybe some focus groups and some office hours where it's one-on-one. Come talk to me. I'm whoever I am in the organization. This is a safe place. I'm not taking notes, or, whatever you need to do to make that person feel safe. But you're not going to get any feedback if people don't feel safe.
That's a great one. Thank you. So following up on, to soliciting feedback, how do you then show that you're actioning the feedback given anonymously? Like, how do you kind of close that loop so someone knows that, it
Yeah.
didn't just go into a black hole?
Yeah. Great question. Great question. You have to do something with it. You have to, two things. I would say if you're doing surveys, you need to advertise out to the organization. Maybe you have an all hands meeting just on this topic. All right, here are the slides. These are all the complaints that people had. These are the concerns people had. These are the things that people highlighted. Be very transparent. You have to build trust, right? So you're transparent. You're not going to be perfect. So don't try to hide things. Okay, so here's what we're going to do about this one. Here's what we're going to do about this one. We can't figure this one out yet. Be honest, right? We're working on it. If you have ideas, send them to us. That transparency will absolutely build trust. The second is, if let's say you have someone in a one-on-one give you something that you're going to follow, you're going to pull that thread. I would absolutely go back to that person and say, hey, we really appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Just so you know, we've done X, Y, and Z. Maybe it's not finished yet, but if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be doing that. That leaves that person with that sense of like, okay, I have done something for my organization, and they appreciate it. You have to be appreciative when people put themselves on the line.
It's a great point. Okay, we're almost done. I've got 2 more questions.
Okay.
One, you sort of answered this during, when it came in, but I wanted to just come back to it. And I'm finding it right here, sorry. So it's another one that has to do with burnout and micro stress. And it's just kind of a broad one. Do you have any recommendations to manage employee burnout and micro stress what policies do you put in place? So I think that's the important thing here is
Mm,
sort of how would you kind of try to do a policy around burnout and micro stress?
that's a tough one. It depends. It depends on their roles, what your org does, etc. Um, but this is a big, like you need HR involved, like you need more than just security involved in this. When you think about, go back to the slide, like in your mind about employee lifecycle management and think about develop and retain, right? Those two parts. That is where, especially, you're really working against the micro stress. So offering paid time, obviously you're going to do paid time off, but like someone comes to you with a certain issue or concern or their trouble at home or whatever, be generous. Maybe you offer 3 weeks paid and that's it. You know what? We're going to give you an additional week. Don't make them come to you in a complete mental breakdown. You don't wait for that point before you're offering support. Have a very robust EAP system in place. Offer services. I have seen companies offer, like, go above and beyond. There's companies like, I think it's Lyra, I don't know how you say it, but it's like free mental health support. It's not tied to the company. It's a third party. They'll find you providers. It's all free. It's all anonymous. Again, they're feeling safe to be able to express those emotions. A lot of times still to this day, even though people are talking about it more, emotions and mental health are still a little bit taboo to some age groups, to some cultures, to some companies, whatever. So it really does boil down to the safety thing again. Um, I don't know. That's a tough one. I would really just focus on that develop and retain area of the employee life cycle, offering things relevant to your organization and your culture to kind of help with that.
Got it. Thank you. And I know you mentioned a specific book, The Burnout Challenge.
Mhm.
You did include a link to it
Oh,
in the
great.
chat. And it seems like that has quite a bit of useful information, recommendation.
Yeah, and
Um,
I would add, David, also to that last question. Remember when I was talking about training and awareness? It doesn't have to be people like me all the time. Bring in people who are, mental health experts. Bring in people who have different things. You want employees to feel seen. You have employees from every walk of life. So you want these talks, you want the things that you offer to be able to resonate with them, right? So just a little food for thought.
awesome. Okay, we've got one more. I think this may be one that a question I can actually handle. It is, where can I see more about this HRM platform? I would just recommend that people, if you want to learn more about Living Security's human risk management platform, Unify, there's a few great places to do that. One is just go to livingsecurity.com. On that page, you will see a link to something we call the HRM Readiness Assessment. That's a great way for you to, get a sense of sort of where your organization is and if your organization is a good candidate to take that next step. And then, as I mentioned before, a great place to learn is just the HRM Human Risk Management Conference on demand. So we have over 10 hours of content there. There's quite a few living security breakout sessions that are essentially live demos that show what you can do across identifying the risk, protecting your employees through nudges, through training, through workflows or orchestrations, and then to report on it, to be able to benchmark and show over time what's happening with individuals, with teams, and with the company as a whole.
David,
So
can I add? Sorry, can I add to that
yes, of
too?
course. Yeah.
Sorry, if anyone knows me, my brain is like pop-up video from VH1 very long time ago. When you're looking at this tool, also, what I would suggest is for any tool that you have, really, when you're trying, if you're trying to build a program or you're trying to prove your ROI, which very oftentimes people in this field are battling, pulling data from tools like that can be really impactful. You are able to show graphs and pictures of how things are changing risk-wise in your organization. Do not discount the importance and the impact of that.
Yeah, completely agree. And one of the big elements of this is scorecards, that even just going out to individual employees on a monthly basis and creating that transparency again, is something that can really lead to great outcomes.
Mhm.
Um, So we're 10 minutes over. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the AMA. Shawnee, thank you so much
Yeah.
for being our guest this month and for all the insights. I think my big takeaways are really around two key words that I think you hit on over and over again. One was empathy, and the
Yes.
other was transparency.
Yes.
Uh, so it seems like those are both incredibly important, when we think
Yes.
about a security culture.
Absolutely. And I'll just, if anyone wants to ask questions offline, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to help.
All right. Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Shawnee, and
Yeah.
thank you for everybody who attended this month. With that, we will close the session, and it will be available on demand as a recording probably in the next 48 hours or so. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for coming in today and for a wonderful discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Good luck.